Hello and welcome to this Top 100 Virtual Roundtable. My name is Catherine and I'm one of the Content and Community Managers here within the Business of Data team at Crinium. It's wonderful to have you joining us today. This event will feature some of the fantastic data and analytics leaders featured within our global Top 100 Innovators in Data Analytics list. Each year we compile this list to celebrate the truly great minds Crinium has the pleasure to work with. Across the next hour, we'll delve into the topics and content which has been discussed, researched and explored in our wider Business of Data content, from our State of the Data Analytics 2020 report through to the themes we touch upon in our weekly podcast. We'd love to hear from you as well, so be sure to leave your thoughts, comments and questions, and our thought leaders will be sure to get back to you. For now, let's dive in. Hello everyone and welcome to our third Top 100 Virtual Roundtable. This time we are speaking with 7 of our European members of our 2020 Global Top 100 Innovators in Data Analytics. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, do be sure to throw us a comment or two. And if you're over with the Business of Data platform, then make sure you engage with us in the chat feature as well. Hello, everyone. Firstly, let me offer a huge congratulations to you all for being featured within this list.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pass over to you individually to introduce yourselves to the audience. But what I'd love for you to do for me, if you could, is answer my ice-breaking question, which is what has been the most unexpected data and analytics outcome for you during this pandemic? Gary, will you take it away for me?
I get first dibs. I think the most interesting thing for me has been the fact that everyone has moved to a virtual environment. And what that's actually done is it's opened people's minds up to data because they're seeing the need in a more virtual representation of our working environment to communicate better, to get better information flows in order to make those decisions. And that's been a very good, from a data perspective, from a data professional perspective, it's been quite a nice positive outcome from the pandemic, if there is one.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hi, Ben. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ben Diaz. I'm the Data Science Analytics Director at EasyJet. For me, the most unexpected thing has been the acceleration of our move towards AI, ML kind of area. Because when I joined EasyJet, we were at the start of the data journey, and I wasn't expecting to need to do such complicated models right at the start. But the pandemic has landed us straight into it. We got to skip all the simple models. We need some difficult AI models now. So it's been really good. And yeah, that's been the most unexpected and positive thing for me.
Fantastic. Right in the deep end. Love that. Camilla, hi, welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Camilla Björkqvist. I am the Data and Analytics Transformation Director at Danone. That's how I say it in English. Depending on where you are in the world, it's a Danone or Danon. So we have, we say in Swedish, a dear child has many names. What has been the most unexpected for me is not necessarily the data and analytics field, but it's the need that we have for human interaction. So a lot of the things that we have started doing have been accelerated. We've changed a few strategic decisions. So a lot of unexpected change, but I think the thing we have missed the most and that this pandemic has shown is the need for human interaction, for conversation, for understanding the insights together. And so, yeah, we've really missed those within Danone.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Hi, Graham.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, so I'm Graham McDermott. I'm Chief Data Officer at TempCover. I have to remember to say that because it's only been a couple of days since I moved to TempCover. Unexpected outcome, I'm going to cheat and say there's 2. So changing jobs, maybe that was slightly unexpected, but that was a good outcome for me, I hope. And the second one was I didn't think I'd be shouting at the TV so much at 5:30 every day or 5:15 at Boris's broadcast and the horrendous charts and tables that we started off with. We got better over time, but let's be honest, they were pretty horrible to start with.
Thank you so much. Hi, Tim, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Tim Lum. I'm an associate director at BCG Platinian. Like Graham, I started this year, so right in the start of the pandemic. But one of the critical things that I think has been a finding is how little data matters, but how important data is at the same time. So all the data that we've had probably in the past, or most of the data we've had in the past, really isn't relevant as much anymore. But then actually data is super important now to actually understand how we navigate out of the pandemic itself. So super important, yet at the same time rendering most of the data that we have in the past useless.
Absolutely, thank you. Hi, Anwar, if you'd like to intro yourself.
Hi, my name's Anwar Mirza. I'm responsible for data strategy and governance, FedEx Express. I'm based here in the Netherlands. I've been with TNT and FedEx for 32 years. And I suppose during the pandemic, the thing that's really hit me quite head on is being exposed to my end user community face to face very regularly, and not having seen many of them in the past and only communicated with them via email and things. That's been a big change. But also the second thing, if I may also cheat, Graham, is realizing and understanding the models that they're building and using, and also new data sources that I didn't even know we had. So that's been a revelation.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, Mina, welcome.
Thank you. I'm a data analytics lead at Finnair, which is the national carrier of Finland. And I'm leading a team responsible of BI and analytics, data science, data management, and data platform. For this pandemic, obviously, the airline industry was hit very hard. And for us, the whole environment has changed so dramatically that we have actually had to take very new perspectives to how we use data and analytics. We have already learned that we need to also use new data sources for predicting the demand, for example. We really need to understand not only where people want to travel, but more also their confidence of traveling in this very changed circumstances. And the other thing for the operations is that we have also had to change a bit the viewpoint from really managing and scaling a big and busy network more to really be able to make fast changes in our small scale network, because the environment and restrictions and everything related to travel changes now so fast.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to you all for joining us today. So the first topic area that I'd really love to dive into with you all today is based around data demand. And I'm so glad this is what I had on the agenda, because you've certainly touched upon it with those unexpected things that have arisen for you, whether that be from your teams or externally. Now, according to our recent 2020 State of Data and Analytics Europe-based report, 60% of data and analytics leaders say demand for their data within their organization has risen due to COVID. So what I'd love to know from you guys is that something you've seen within your organization? And if so, how have you handled that increase for data demand? Camilla, I'm going to come to you first.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think at Danone, we are really at the beginning of our journey, which means we see an incredible demand on the data and analytics team and what we're doing. It's hard for me to predict if this would have happened as well without COVID. I think because we're so new on the field, the demand has shifted. I think that's definitely the new thing. We're looking much more into artificial intelligence, into understanding how we can use it for good. So we have the One Planet, One Health strategy, where we're also putting in our data to understand how do we not only predict what the customer is demanding, and you know, of course, with the volatility we've had in the retail and the customers, restaurants, etc. That's huge volatilities for our demand planners. It's really challenging, and they need data that they can trust and that they have stable data sources. But as well, looking into things like weather patterns. We have violence on the streets. Can we get our supplies through? Do we have a stable supply chain? I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming our way. And it could be because of COVID. It could be just because we are in that new phase of the industry. But yeah, we can definitely see that there are huge demands coming our way.
Thank you so much. I think that's so important to acknowledge as well, is that it's such a multivariate issue. Graham, how about you? How have you seen data demand in the industry increase?
So I think I'd probably say I had a foot in two camps. So for my previous company, similar to sort of Finnair, travel industry, really badly affected by the pandemic, and then converse to the company I've just joined, Temp Cover. Other than the sort of immediate lockdown period, actually subsequent to that, been performing extremely well. In fact, they're having all-time records trading. So, but in terms of demand for data, what I actually saw was probably a different to what other data leaders. So maybe in the 40% that we didn't see a massive increase. And I think some of that was because we built a lot of self-serve reporting and analytics so people could answer questions about what is happening. But what we got then was posed harder questions about what might happen. And I think, a lot of companies were getting asked those questions and they were struggling because, as been mentioned already, people didn't really have data, and people might try and form a view, but you really didn't know what was going to happen next, how long it was going to go on, what the customer's reaction was going to be to things. And I think we saw the first few weeks, or even the first, 2 months almost, where we saw in some ways demand drop off for us, but spiky, really hard things that we struggled to do, or regulatory requests, for example. But at the same time, we had a change of ownership of our previous business simultaneously. So that into the mix probably affected it. I suspect had we not had that change of ownership at the same time, we may have had a team in place already that would have been operating slightly differently. But I think having so much capability already helped us answer, I call it the easy questions, but what's just happened, how are we tracking? I think one other point to make is there was a demand for instantaneous answers, which is really hard. And maybe sometimes the question being asked wasn't the right question. And they wanted an answer when sometimes you would have been better off to think about the question. But people were panicking, in all businesses were panicking as to what was going to happen. And for us, we saw a change in, some of the metrics we were looking at. And you're going from trying to grow your business to just survival mode, and that's quite different on a data analytics team in terms of the demands that and the types of requests that you get.
I think that's a great point you make there, Graham, because the expectation that the turnaround on demand is going to be quick and almost instantaneous has always been there, but it's been somewhat brought to the forefront during the pandemic. Also, the fact that the expectation that the quality is going to be perfect and data is almost available on demand. These are expectations that have been there always in the background in the past, but they're really being brought to the forefront now. I think the big worry for me is that the assumption that some of the foundation data services are in place, and the expectation that they're all there, i.e. the backbone of data is rock solid and continues to stay that way, data being mastered, defined, properly owned, and that along with this increase for analytics data, I think that's been a challenge that a lot of companies and colleagues and of mine have faced.
I agree with that. I think the challenge on the foundation. So I joined BP September last year, so it wasn't very long into the job when COVID hit. But a lot of the work we're doing is trying to focus on those foundations to get the basics right, so that we can get the fast turnaround, the assurance of the data, the accessibility, and that's getting better and better. But when you have rapid market changes in a very volatile situation, one of the things we've tried to do is to facilitate or to allow the business areas to be dynamic, to do things that may be less tactical, to get the information they need. So long as we can keep track of it, get visibility of it, and how we might then regroup and remediate some of those gaps later while we continue to focus on those strategic elements. And I think that's part of the challenge in a situation like COVID, where everything is very fast moving, trying to allocate your resources appropriately to be able to manage those long-term strategic goals while still delivering the near-term tactical requirements.
I think one of the key questions that we get asked a lot is essentially that how do we keep the human still in the picture? One element that really COVID has brought to bear is that you can't really do a lot of the tap on the shoulder type of question asking that you usually do in the office and say, hey, I have, this doesn't quite look right. Is that the case? And so unless you have truly good remote working capabilities that you almost mimic that aspect of things, it really drives home the need for the human in this whole picture of understanding, but also the need for the data to be right. But as you know, a couple of the folks here have said, it isn't always going to be right, especially with the change in the way that the data is going to be now, and the need for different types of data to solve the issues that we've got as part of the pandemic. And again, coming out of it, how do we navigate out of it? That's a completely different set of data and completely different set of questions than we would have had before. So this element of now keeping that human in the picture, to be able to ask the right questions, especially in a changing dynamic, that's actually a very difficult thing, and actually increases the demand of analytics, but not really because it's a heightened sense of demand. It's more because there are new things that need to be created and new questions that need to be answered as well.
That's absolutely brilliant. Now, something that's just arisen to me then from hearing those contributions is what I'd love to know is, where are you experiencing the demand mostly coming from? Is it top down? You want to provide answers to the exec board? Is it bottom up that the teams are really wanting this data to be able to work with? Where are you experiencing that demand?
Well, it's interesting. I think we're seeing it from all sides. I think in BP, we're also going through a reinvention where we're moving from a classic oil and gas company into a new energy company. And that whole change is creating a new demand for new types of data to start looking at the carbon footprint of our products and to see how we do that. So we're trying to get a lot of innovation, and there's demand coming from the top down on driving some of those initiatives. Meanwhile, we've got people in my part of the business in the trading organization trying to manage the markets, trying to manage the supply and demand, and having a great deal of requirements for data day to day. And so we're seeing it from all sides. And I think it's really positive to have that level of demand. It's difficult always and sometimes delivering to that, but actually seeing more and more of the company understanding the reality of that the data is necessary to drive all of these initiatives, and that's actually creating a focal point of how people are aligning to deliver into that. And we're looking forward to 2021, where we'll have more resources to be able to tackle some of those challenges.
Yeah, for us, it's also both the top management as well as the really operational work, but maybe the operational work even more. And I think the change is also that now we really need to ask the questions. Maybe in the past there are people who have been working for 30 plus years in the industry, and they have the gut feeling and they know how things operate, how things work, what affects what usually. But now the environment is so different, and that they are really forced to ask those questions and use the data and look at the data instead of the long experience of working on the field. So I think that has really increased the demand, and I think that's also a positive thing to see that the colleagues really know or can really ask the questions, and they really do trust the data and understand that that is important tool now.
It's certainly something I've noticed across all of our events. Is something that used to be on every agenda was, making sure data-driven decisions are the front line of businesses. And it seems that data-driven culture is certainly more embedded than it ever has been before. But now it's kind of extending into, as you've just brilliantly pointed on there, trust in the data, and making sure that extends into data literacy programs and other things like that. Now, I'm really keen, Ben, to pick up on a point you made at the beginning there about your acceleration into AI and machine learning much quicker than perhaps pre-COVID would have pointed at. How have you seen kind of the demand for data and getting those things off the ground? How has that journey been for you?
Yeah, and it's kind of being related to the gut feel kind of not working anymore. And equally for the algorithms that were there before, also kind of if you're looking at historical data and trying to predict the demand for the next 2 weeks or 3 months, it's not going to work anymore. So we've had to kind of completely move from the standard, the simpler models that we were starting with to more AI reinforcement learning type of algorithms where we're bringing in external data sources and kind of doing cleverer and more complex models to try and predict the demand, at least in the short term, to be able to kind of navigate this volatile landscape. And it's volatile in kind of 2 dimensions for us, both in terms of customer demand. So whenever there's a quarantine announced, then people will suddenly want to change their behavior. Or if a quarantine is released, then they change their behavior in a different way. And then the competitors are doing kind of weird and wonderful things as well. You can't predict what they're going to do almost. So kind of being able to incorporate all of those into the models, you can't build simple linear models anymore. So they're all complex, and we need to bring these more complicated models in, which was just great because we wanted to do those things, but you have to take people on a journey. But before COVID, I was kind of hand-holding some parts of the organization, taking them on that journey. In some places, fighting the gut feel, where they felt their gut feel was better than the models. And then suddenly COVID happens, and everyone's like, "Oh, hey Ben, we need you." we need some model, we need some help to kind of navigate this because nobody knows what's going to happen next. So that's kind of where I've experienced the change. As the other driver for data and analytics has been kind of doing more with less. I've kind of seen where kind of a lot of functions have got smaller, or they have more work to do because we're generating more schedules than we used to do. Like previously, we'd generate like 2 or 3 schedules a year. Now we're having to change all the time because everything's changing externally. So everyone's having to do more with less, and so automation and data-driven automation in particular is helping a lot of the functions to do more and to have a bigger impact.
Ben, I've got a question for you there. On that journey that you're taking people through, I often find that you have to almost bring people along in their knowledge levels in terms of awareness or education or training or just data literacy as a whole. How much of a challenge has that been for you? Do you formalize it, or do you just do it as part of your explanation of how you built your model and help them along?
Oh, pre-COVID, it was all formalized, and we had a roadmap and a plan and everything. But that's all out the door these days at the moment. So, part of the question that Catherine asked is how are we dealing with it? One of the things we've had to do is really focus on impact. And so even if, as Gary was saying, we're getting requests from everywhere, we're focusing on impact and saying, okay, if we can do only 3 things, what are the 3 most important, impactful things? We're focusing on those. So that meant that we're focusing on 1 or 2 functions at a time, and so then it's easier to work closely with them. The whole team is kind of working as one team with the business function and the data team. And so that way the learning also kind of happens as we go. But it's not happening in any formal way at the moment. We need to survive to thrive at the moment, and then later on we'll take it growing again.
Absolutely.
That's a really important
now
point.
I'm going to move the conversation. Oh, sorry, go on, Graham.
I mean, I think it's a really important point, because I think data professionals, in my experience, love order and don't like chaos. So, one of the things for Ben and for the rest of us as data leaders actually is to try and, we might feel in chaos, but actually we've got to help our teams cope with the chaos and the demands, from all around the business, and that's a really important part of the leadership of a data function, I think.
Yeah. And that's also where some of those data foundations that several people have talked about, things like data ownership and making sure that the business leaders are accountable and actually start fulfilling their responsibilities with data, because then it isn't just the data teams that are focusing on the hygiene factor. It's the company doing that as a whole. And I think that's part of our job is to bring that forward and help our teams and help the organization to instigate what's really a cultural change as to how we deal with data. Within BP, I don't own all of the analytics. The analytics tends to be, it is federated towards directly with the business. What I'm then focused on is how to drive out the better data so that those analytics teams who are supporting the business insight can do it better, more consistently, faster, etc. And I think it really does need to come from a business-led approach, and that for me really starts with a business ownership of their data.
Brilliant. Now I'm going to move the conversation on, because this is a question and topic area that comes up frequently within our events, contents, comments, you name it. It always finds its way there. So I figured, what better group to ask than the top 100? What advice would you give to a member of the data analytics community who is struggling to actively translate the business, the data value to business return of investment, so business value, that translating task between data through to business? What's the advice you would give? Mina, I'm going to come to you first for that.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite topic, so thanks for starting with me. I would say it's always starting from the business outcome. So what change do you want to get with this data and analytics solution? What question do you want to get answered, but also what will be the change be then? Like, what's the real value? What's the benefit? What can you do better? What can you sell more? Where can you save time or make better decision? It's always starting from the business value, and then when the work is linked to that value, then it really has the solid story. And we've done quite a lot of work on that area to really try to map all the data and analytics initiatives to the business outcome. And then also the next step for us is to find a way to really measure also the benefit achieved and kind of build a loop that we can also follow, not only what was invested and built, but also the throughout the whole life cycle of the solution, that it really creates the value that it's supposed to or expected to create. And if it doesn't at some point, then also have the courage to stop doing such things. So for example, we have done our flight delay prediction, machine learning, modeling work, and that is very, very concretely linked to the actual value for the business, that we are able to predict which flights are likely to be delayed, and then we also get the impact on kind of a cost-wise, but also customer satisfaction-wise, and can take actions early enough in the process.
Brilliant. I love that kind of cyclical approach. Yeah. Tim, how about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, it's really quite similar to Mika, really, in the sense that first, you really need to understand what you're using the data for. What is the business set of outcomes? What are the set of use cases that this data will provide? And whether or not that is something that exists in the business or an improvement of that process that the business has today. Right. And if it's something new, it's really testing out and being able to measure. I mean, you control the data after all. I mean, you not own it, but necessarily bring it together. It's really kind of helping to measure what this solution, once in place, actually has and what it does to the business outcomes, and testing that and measuring that against when you don't have it. And those are the types of mentalities that then will really help you to start measuring this either post or in a sort of pre-post fashion, or if you can even sort of A/B test it with, say you're in a position that you can deploy in certain markets, and in other cases you can't really, or you don't deploy in certain markets. What does that actually then end up doing between the performance of those markets, whether that is in operations or in revenue? That helps you to really start thinking about the impact that your data and the analytics and algorithms have on the business outcome, and therefore valuing what it is that the team actually does. So whether that's an incremental revenue or a decrease in cost as a result of, in an airline case, improved flight scheduling or improved fuel consumption, or in another case, in a retailer sense, increased sales above and beyond what it is that they have been able to do of late. So that's the kind of thing that I would say, first think about what is the use case, what are the metrics that the business, that you'll impact on the business front, and then be able to try to A/B test or do a pre-post of applying said new data and analytics versus when it isn't applied.
Brilliant.
I think just to challenge. I think just to challenge
Go on,
that.
Graham.
I think both examples are really good when it's sort of something a bit bigger that's going to take a few weeks or a few months or longer to build, and that's how we traditionally approach deciding prioritization of data projects. I think as we entered the pandemic, lots of things came out of the woodwork, lots of things were urgent. There's a real danger of who shouts loudest. And also the the historical method of prioritization in terms of value we talk about. So we used to have like a sort of try and calculate a net margin per incremental transaction over 2 years and say that's the how you differentiate the value. Actually, for us, it became cash flow protection was the number one priority. So that was like a slightly different metric and method of deciding what you did next or what was highest priority. Thrown in the mix, some regulatory demands that are drop dead. You've got no choice. You must respond to the regulator, and you've got 48 hours. End of. There's no value calculation required to prioritize that type of demand, particularly as that regulatory demand is sometimes about being able to continue to trade. You won't be allowed. We weren't going to be allowed to carry on trading as a travel company unless we could prove to them that what we were doing, for example.
It's interesting, the ROI, and I agree with everything everyone said on that. We've actually implemented what we call a hypothesis register that we can use for whether it be proof of concepts, whether it be machine learning experiments or data sets that we want to do, and we can start tracking that. But when you start looking at the foundational capabilities or the more enterprise capabilities, it then becomes a more interesting conversation, because then the value add is actually distributed and shared, and articulating that on its own becomes a harder thing. So one of the things you can do is to start coming up with metrics that you agree some common principles, that these are good things, that data quality is a good thing. You can in some cases articulate that if I improve the accuracy of customer data or pricing data, this is the amount of absolute revenue we expect. But in some cases, it's a foundational capability that you build everything else off of. And you just need to agree some principles as to what good looks like. And that if you accept that, then you start almost having very much a principle-based conversation around these things will build a foundation for further work. And we just accept as a company that is a necessary investment.
Actually,
how are you being able to do that during the pandemic time, Gary? Because like Graham said, the conversations are different.
It's a mixture of both. Fortunately, we've kicked off a number of pieces of work before the pandemic. So we've tried to carry on with those as much as we can because they are foundational. And as BP looks to reinvent itself, some of those new initiatives, the growth initiatives, are going to be data-driven. And we want to be able to support that. So this is what I was saying before. You've got the short-term need that you need to support. And in some cases, we've had to let the distributed business areas do what they need to do to answer their questions, while we keep a parallel thread focus on those strategic elements, because we can't stop that work, because that's the long-term future.
I think this is something that's really important, the point you just made there, because if you embed data and its impact into the heart of the organization, into business as usual processes, and the example I can give is similar to the one quoted there, for more than 2 decades now, we've been embedding the cost of poor quality and its impact on pricing, costing, and rate card calculations, etc. These are the sorts of things where we're immediately able to tell if there's a 0.01 or a 1% shift in data quality. That's a very tangible thing. How will that affect our pricing approach? And embedding these processes into your day-to-day business is a critical thing.
Yeah, I think in our environment, one very good kind of not KPI but measure is also the employee satisfaction, in a sense that when there is good quality, right time data and information available for our colleagues who work, for example, on the customer frontline, they will be much happier because they really can do their work much better, and they have the information that they need, and they feel empowered, and having that kind of a storyline also spread, or those stories spread across the enterprise, and making those kind of stories visible. That's I think also one way to strengthen the power of data and analytics to be recognized.
So the other thing I've been kind of pushing is this lean, agile, iterative way of working. I think the pandemic has helped us push that with the business a lot easier, because they need stuff quicker. So they're happy for us now to build an MVP, a minimum viable product, the simplest possible model, and give it to them. We deploy it, they start using it and start generating some value while we keep iterating on the model in the background. And it has two things that happen. It starts generating value earlier, and so you get more over the lifetime. It also gives us valuable feedback while we're developing, so we can add that feedback into the model, especially during this time when we're dealing with the volatility in demand and supply and everything else, because we don't really know what the solution needs to be at the start. Actually building something and using it helps us to define what we're trying to do as well. In some instances, it's been really good catapult into this whole lean agile way of working, which has been great to see happen.
Yeah, I think I would really second that. I think we've tried to move away from trying to put a number on the return of investment that we can deliver. What we have really pushed is it's a symbiosis between data, IT, and the business, and we together have to define what the business outcome is, and then we will all own it. And we will not at this point go into a conversation on if marketing wouldn't have been there, or if data wouldn't have been there, or etc. Would it then have worked? We've said if all of these parties would have not been at the table, it would not have been successful. And then we measure the business value. So that's really the focus that we've had.
And one of the things we found one of the things we found with the modeling in the current environment is we're trying to predict new things and new ways of working, and so we're looking at which types of data can we extract insight into, and it's actually bringing some interesting conversations, because you may have data available that you hadn't thought to use in a particular way. We're then looking at how do we backtest that. And we're now saying, okay, we have the data, we can build a model, but we don't have enough historical data in order to backtest that. So we're looking creatively at how can we get that, how can we acquire that. And even where there's internal sets, you may not have captured some of the data before, you have access to it. So it's about how do we do that, how do you make the interpolations, and how do you assess the quality of the models that are being built on that. And all of that comes down to how quickly we can acquire, ingest, process the data. And as people are saying, this is a collaboration. My job is to enable value in the business. I don't have to take absolute credit for all of that. as long as the business is doing better and we're getting that insight, that's what we're all driving towards.
Yeah.
Actually,
and I think a quick win for us has been. Sorry, I hear. So what we've noticed, a quick win has been that there's the same data sources being procured all across the globe, and just finding those data sources and saying, well, hey guys, let's share them, let's get them all into one place, make them accessible to everybody. I think that has been a very nice quick win for us.
And what I was going to add is signing up to the benefits, like Gary was saying, we as the data team can't deliver the benefits, we can enable them. And when you're in a growth phase and you're trying to imagine the art of the possible, people are less inclined to sign up to the benefits, whereas now that COVID is hit and they need this stuff, they're more willing to sign up to the benefits as well, which is brilliant.
Brilliant. Now, as the clock ticks away here into our last 20 minutes, something that has really stood out to me is we've had words of acceleration, quicker, urgent, pressure all arise during this discussion. Now, I'd love to know how you've managed to keep the positivity in your data teams, because I assume most of you at some point have been remote working. And I assume that most of you are still, at least in part, still working from home as well. Not an easy task. So how have you maintained a positive data culture during this time? Mina, I'll come to you first for that one.
Yeah, well, surely it has been a very different period, and I was maybe positively surprised how fast our teams actually moved to work remotely and still had the daily interaction and kept the dialogue going. So really using the digital platforms, Teams and Slack for communication. It was a very, very interesting and positive finding. But of course, it's not the same as when you really have these more random, relaxed encounters, having lunch together, having coffees. Although we try to, for example, organize kind of an unofficial coffee break over Teams on regular basis, just to chat random things and keep that kind of positive feeling ongoing, and I think it helped there. But yeah, I mean, I'm still eager to learn what others have done and take learnings from you. I don't know what would be the silver bullet to really keep the same kind of collaboration and atmosphere ongoing on the digital world as it is when you're actually meeting the people face to face.
Well, there we go. That's a great question in itself, is how have you managed to maintain those kind of softer social interactions with your teams, which, they may not have any direct kind of tick box, this is what we're going to cover on the agenda, but actually that's where those ideas kind of spark and those collaborations and interactions as well. Camilla, sorry, I cut you off. Carry on.
No, that's all right. Yeah, so I actually built my team during this pandemic, and I'm building a team both in Paris and in Amsterdam, here where I live, as well as around the world. And we've done similar things like a virtual coffee time. And the way we tried to spark the conversation was to put themes to it. So, for example, we had themes like, who's your superhero? And then we had people even dress up as superheroes and have fun that way. We had to talk about your clock or your watch day, talk about share a picture of where you're sitting. So we tried to really pick topics and do it virtually. But of course, keeping the data culture and the alive in the company as a whole, I think, just finding the team members and building the cohesiveness was one thing, but then to drive the strategy of people-driven and data-enabled into the organization of more than 100,000 people during a pandemic has been quite the interesting journey that we've been on. So I love my job. I spend morning until evening speaking to people from all across the world about why they should care about data and analytics, why this means a transformation for them, why they want to sign up to the Data Academy we're setting up. I mean, all these things. And it's a lot about the human interaction. And I think I started that with that in the beginning. We need it, apparently, and it's really becoming clearer how much we need it as human beings. So me, for one, I'm very excited that we're starting to go back to the office slowly but surely.
I think one of the things that's interesting about the current way of working, though, is that for the people that would be in your local team, who would sit right next to you, that you could have those kind of over the desk conversations, there's a bit of a detriment. But we've tried to make up for that by having regular dialogue. But for the rest of the organization that's distributed globally, actually, in many ways, the new way of working is opened things up. It's made things more accessible. I find myself talking to people in all parts of the world far more than I might have otherwise done, because it would have been too easy just to talk to the people who are right around me. So in many ways, there's been some positives because we've opened that up. Like others, I had some members of my team that actually were onboarded during the lockdown, and that was very interesting. I was relatively new to BP myself, and trying to build that internal network, trying to get them docked into the right conversations was a bit more challenging, but it just took more dialogue. And one of the things I think that's been very positive that we've tried to do is we've built out what we call a data champion network. So we've taken we've used like-minded individuals from different parts of the business all over BP to come together and form a network who can help champion data, who can act as a vocal proponent of the principles, the changes that we're implementing in their business area, and they act as a conduit back to us as far as issues that they might have, and that facilitates conversation. And the data teams are able to pick up on that, so it gives them another avenue of who they can contact. And as far as the demand, actually, while having a lot of demand has its own challenges, having too much demand is actually very motivating, because it shows that you're needed, that people want what you're trying to deliver. And it's then a matter of trying to ensure that my team doesn't get overwrought by trying to do everything for everyone, that we can actually take a moment to prioritize and look at how we're going to build out our capabilities and that strategic approach. But too much demand isn't really a problem. If it was too little demand, I'd be very worried.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Tim, I think you want to make a point.
That we've done, informally and formally, right? So on the informal side of things, it's really great to get more social events happening within your team to ensure that then there is that camaraderie that's built. We're a global organization, and we actually pull people from different parts of the globe, especially in Western Europe. And what this actually has done is to open up people to meet others with a sort of data focus in different cultures, and actually start to have these kind of dialogues that you wouldn't otherwise have had, and actually motivates people to have that sort of discussion around the difference, discussions around how things happen in other parts of the world, say in South Africa or Paris or Amsterdam. But then it's also starting to bring things together, like doing either wine tastings or gin tastings together as part of the team, or as an informal element of team building. But then also on the formal side of it, it's really starting to bring the project teams together and doing something more show and tell, like in terms of the data that exists, the things that you're working on in data, in order to help people understand some of the context, right, of what's going on. Because ultimately, in this day and age, everyone's just checking the news to see what's happening with COVID and the pandemic and what cases are. So people are actually really wanting to get that information. And so you have to spend a little bit more time thinking about and organizing both the social and the formal. But that pays back in dividends, because you do see that people really want to have this information. People are actually yearning for it. And a lot of the folks that I work with in projects really are interested in what the data is actually telling them, because they otherwise wouldn't necessarily know what to do now. There's that lack of gut feel. I think, as Mina was saying earlier, there's that lack of it. It really drives that want and need. So you have to be a little bit more as a leader on guard to say, well, we have to plan some of the social events because the water cooler moments are no longer there, but then actually also plan the formal events because you can no longer display dashboards in a workplace as people sort of casually walk around. So you have to do both things and just be a proponent to make sure that those things happen as a data leader.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it sounds contradictory, kind of forcing these social interactions, but actually, if you don't do it, it doesn't happen. So I actually appointed a CFO, a chief fun officer in our team, and it's their job to kind of make sure it happens. And if you don't have someone focusing on it, it won't happen. So, that's an idea if you want to take it and run with it.
That's a great
I'm going
idea.
to copy that one.
Yeah, Ben, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, so us at Crinium, as many of you know, we're completely remote based and always have been. But part of being remote based is that usually you're very social outside of work. You go to the pub at the weekends, you're involved in lots of hobbies and activities. Obviously, all of that stopped in lockdown. So suddenly we found ourselves in a very similar position to everyone else, despite already being remote working. And we're very fortunate to have several colleagues who kind of rose to the challenge of organising Zoom quizzes and the likes, and it really did help. So I absolutely agree with that. So we're winding down into the last 10 minutes or so of this wonderful discussion. Now, again, along with the theme of you guys being kind of the best of the best that there is, I always like to pick your brains for advice. So looking to the future, and I don't imagine any of you own a crystal ball, what advice would you give to your peers in the data analytics space for the next 6 months or so? What would you say is the thing you need to keep at the front of your mind? Graham, do you want to take that one?
I was hoping you're going to go somewhere else with that question. Crikey. I suppose I'm going to use the adage, keep calm and carry on. I think it would be far too easy to panic. And some of the points we've just sort of talked about, having some fun. A lot of people I've worked with, in my previous company, my current company, and my network group, have found one of the biggest bonuses, of course, is extra time, and they've been using some of the extra time to improve their learning, to spend time with their family, to have a bit of fun. And not just fun with external people, but also fun with their work colleagues. So we've generally found that's kept people motivated and going. But I think the crystal ball is saying that we don't know what the new norm is. So stop trying to predict what it is, and we're going to just arrive there at some point. And I think as data leaders, we're going to have to sort of morph our team and our own behaviours as we settle to whatever the new norm is, and that's in terms of customer behavior, in terms of employee behavior, office attendance, all the things that have suddenly changed since March the, whatever you want to call it, 23rd probably for the UK.
Brilliant. Anwar?
I would say it's very important to keep the newswire going. Stay in touch with everyone, tell them what you're doing, tell them what bugs you, tell them where you need help, and give help where it's needed. That's what I would advise.
Brilliant. Ben, how about you?
Just add to what Graham was saying. Data and models, however complicated they are, they won't have much of an impact with other people. So I think people are the key thing. If you have to focus on one thing, focus on your people. Make sure, like I'm always saying, over communicate at this point. Talking to them about what's going on in the company, outside, in the team, etc., and kind of just make sure people are looked after, and then everything else will work out.
Brilliant. Tim, how about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think one of the key things now is to, I know it may be difficult because the demand is there, but in other situations where data is usually taken for granted, analytics is usually taken for granted, revel a little bit in the fact that this is the time that data is shining, and the fact that actually everyone else is going through very similar situations and conditions to yourself, and that if there are things that are difficult now, is to continue to build your network, because these networks do help to keep you a little bit more in check in terms of you're not the only one going through this, you're not the only one feeling the pressure. But it definitely at the same time revel in the fact that data is having its time because of the pandemic.
And whether he's realised it or not, Tim's just opened himself up to a lot of LinkedIn connections by saying that. But I think that's something that everyone on the call would be definitely open with. And it's something here at Crinium we're very passionate about, is creating that opportunity for people to feel each other's pain. And you've hit the nail beautifully on the head there, Tim, that actually this is not a unique situation to any organisation. And actually many people are feeling the same sorts of pain. So that's fantastic. Who are we going to next? Gary, how about you? What advice would you give?
Well, I would agree with everything everyone else has said. I think just to add to that is that I would advise to stay the course on your strategic programs. While there's a short-term need to solve immediate problems, stay the course. Make sure that you over-communicate why that strategic program is in place or programs are in place, and that everyone, while we have so much focus on data, that the organization is focused on where we need to get to and what that destination is. We've got a unique visibility at the moment, and I think over communicating and using that as a platform to help change that culture is a positive outcome that we can take.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Camilla.
Let me bring it to a philosophical point. I think the advice I would give any data leader and analytics leader today is sketch the dream. Make sure that you have the dream and you paint the dream, and you do that for your teams, but also for the leaders of the business you're working in. And then start moving one step at a time. And indeed, I agree, we have to focus on foundations, even though short term is something that feels safe to work on right now because it's urgent. But make sure you have the foundations and explain why. And really, really important is have fun along the way. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for all of us in this area. We can make a huge difference. So let's grab onto it, hold on to it, and have a fantastic ride.
And Catherine,
what a brilliant note to end on there.
Sorry, can I just
go on, Anwar?
Corinium needs to carry on doing what it's doing too. That's another piece of advice, because without that, these sorts of networks and exchanges wouldn't be possible, and we need to keep that going as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And the clock is telling me that we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're extremely busy, so thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's been watching us on LinkedIn, or you may have been over at the Business of Data website. It's been wonderful to have you. Join us next Thursday for our next Top 100 Virtual Roundtable. But until then, thank you very much. We really hope you enjoyed that hour of content. I certainly did. I do adore working with these executives. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the platform and following our social page to be first in line for this fantastic content. Until next time, stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.